In The Revenant, 2015, directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu, Pawaka is the daughter of the Iñárritu chief. She serves as a key figure in a parallel subplot that humanizes the Iñárritu warriors and critiques the violence of colonial expansion. Pawaka has been kidnapped by French trappers, who hold her captive as a sexual slave. This abduction motivates the Iñárritu's aggressive attacks on fur-trapping expeditions throughout the film. Early on, their raid on the American trappers, led by Captain Henry and including Hugh Glass, stems from their search for her, not random savagery. Elk Dog, the Iñárritu chief, later confronts the French leader, explaining that white men stole his daughter and everything else from his people, underscoring themes of loss and retaliation. The explicit scene occurs when Glass, on his survival journey, infiltrates the French camp at night. He witnesses the rape of Pawaka by a trapper against a tree. She is bound, struggling but showing a numb, empty expression, described in reviews as a raw, non-glamorized depiction of trauma, without typical Hollywood dramatization, no screaming or heroic struggle. Glass interrupts by holding a gun to the raper's head, silencing him. He then points out a knife to Pawaka, speaking in Iñárritu. She grabs it, threatens or begins to castrate the trapper, implied or shown in some accounts as her revenge, and escapes. Glass frees horses to aid her flight and cover his own actions. This moment is brief but brutal, highlighting the sexual violence Indigenous women faced during the fur trade era. Critics and Indigenous viewers have noted its realism and emotional impact, though some criticize it as exploitative. Pawaka reunites with her father and the Iñárritu tribe. In the film's climax, after Glass fights John Fitzgerald, the man who betrayed him, but spares his final kill, remembering a Pawnee's words that revenge is in the Creator's hands, he pushes Fitzgerald into the river. The Iñárritu arrive, with Pawaka riding alongside Elk Dog, the Iñárritu chief. They kill and scalp Fitzgerald but spare Glass, recognizing him, via Pawaka's gaze, as the man who freed her. She rides past him regally, symbolizing survival and agency despite her ordeal. Pawaka, her abduction, the rape, and the entire subplot are fictional additions by the screenwriters. The real Glass had no known son, and no such daughter rescue narrative exists in historical accounts. The story element reflects broader historical realities of violence against Indigenous women but is not tied to Glass's specific legend. I will propose thereafter a summary of the movie. Glass, experienced frontiersman and guide, is part of a fur-trapping expedition led by Captain Andrew Henry. The group of rugged trappers camps by a river, hunting beaver and preparing pelts. Tensions are evident, many resent Glass for his Native American ties and his protective instincts toward Hawk, who accompanies him. John Fitzgerald, a cynical and self-serving trapper, particularly distrusts Glass and shows prejudice toward Hawk. The piece shatters in the film's first major action sequence, a sudden, brutal ambush by a war party of Iñárritu warriors, led by Chief Elk Dog. The Iñárritu are not attacking randomly, they are searching for Elk Dog's daughter, Pawaka, who has been kidnapped by French trappers. The attack is chaotic and visceral, arrows rain down from the trees and riverbanks, warriors emerge from the water and forest, and hand-to-hand combat ensues with guns, knives, and tomahawks. The trappers are caught off guard while skinning animals and loading pelts, many are killed instantly, scalped, or shot. Glass fights defensively, urging the men to abandon the valuable pelts and flee to their boat on the river for escape. He carries a wounded comrade at one point, prioritizing lives over goods. Fitzgerald, in contrast, fights aggressively and greedily tries to salvage pelts. Captain Henry rallies the survivors, and they make a desperate retreat to the longboat, rowing downstream under continued arrow fire. The group suffers heavy losses, over half the men die, but escapes with their lives, leaving the pelts behind that eye in the aftermath. The surviving trappers, now weary and diminished, abandon the river for an overland journey back to their Fort Kiowa, fearing further attacks. Glass, Using his tracking skills, scouts ahead for game to feed the group while they navigate the harsh, snowy wilderness. This sets up the isolation that leads directly into the next pivotal moment. While scouting alone for food, Glass encounters a mother grizzly bear with cubs. This opening section establishes the film's themes of survival, human cruelty, colonial violence, and the fragile line between life and death in the frontier, while humanizing the Arikara's motivations rather than portraying them as mere aggressors. The bear attack scene is a roughly 6-minute, intensely brutal sequence shot to feel like a continuous, unflinching take. Hugh Glass, Leonardo DiCaprio, scouting alone in a dense forest, spots 2 grizzly bear cubs ahead of him. He freezes, slowly turning to see the massive mother sow charging at him from close range. She explodes toward him low and fast, slamming him to the ground with immense force. The bear mauls him viciously, biting into his back, neck, and limbs, clawing deep gashes across his throat, chest, and body, ragdolling him through the air and slamming him against trees and the forest floor. Glass screams in agony, desperately firing his rifle point blank into the bear's face, wounding but not stopping it, then stabbing repeatedly with his knife as blood sprays and the camera lens fogs from the bear's breath. The attack is not a clean fight, it's a one-sided mauling, with the bear pinning him, biting his hand and leg, and tossing him around. At one point, the bear seems to pause and wander off slightly, as if losing interest, only to charge back for another ferocious assault. Finally, Glass drives his knife deep into the bear's side multiple times. The wounded bear staggers, and in its dying collapse, its enormous lifeless body falls directly on top of Glass, crushing him beneath its weight as he gasps weakly. The sequence is raw and visceral, emphasizing the bear's protective maternal rage, the overwhelming power and speed of the animal, and Glass's helpless terror, with no music, just growls, roars, screams, crunching impacts, and forest sounds. After the bear attack, his hunting party soon arrives, hearing the earlier commotion. They push the bear's carcass off him and discover Glass barely alive, his body torn open with deep gashes across his throat, back, chest, and limbs, ribs exposed, scalp partially ripped, blood soaking the snow. He is unable to speak coherently or move much, emitting only guttural rasps and groans. The men fashion a makeshift stretcher from branches and hides, carrying the near-corpse Glass through the harsh winter wilderness as they flee potential Arikara pursuit. The journey is grueling, snowstorms rage, rivers freeze, and Glass's condition deteriorates. He develops a fever, his wounds fester, and he coughs up blood. Captain Andrew Henry leads the group, while John Fitzgerald repeatedly argues that Glass is a burden who will die anyway and should be mercy-killed or abandoned to avoid slowing them down and risking everyone's lives. Unable to bring himself to kill Glass, Henry offers extra pay to volunteers who will stay behind with him until he dies and ensure a proper burial. Glass's half-Pawnee son, Hawk, young trapper Jim Bridger, and the opportunistic Fitzgerald agree to remain as the main party departs that IN camp. The 3 tend to Glass minimally, feeding him broth, bandaging wounds, but tensions rise. Fitzgerald, impatient and fearful of Arikara attack, attempts to smother Glass with a pillow while Hawk is away. Hawk returns and intervenes, leading to a brutal confrontation. Fitzgerald stabs Hawk to death in front of the helpless, immobilized Glass, who watches in silent horror, tears streaming as he rasps futilely. Fitzgerald hides Hawk's body in the snow nearby, then convinces the reluctant Bridger that Arikara are approaching and they must flee immediately. Despite Bridger's protests, Fitzgerald drags the still-living Glass to a freshly dug shallow grave in the frozen earth. He partially buries him alive, shoveling dirt over his body while Glass weakly struggles and stares up in terror. Before throwing more soil on top and abandoning him, Bridger hesitates but ultimately leaves with Fitzgerald, secretly placing his engraved canteen near the grave as a gesture of remorse. Glass, buried under a thin layer of dirt and snow, claws his way out with tremendous effort, pushing through the soil, emerging bloodied and gasping into the cold night air, his face caked in mud as he begins to crawl away on his belly through the wilderness. He begins crawling on his belly across the snowy landscape, unable to stand due to his shattered leg and overall frailty. Over the following days, Glass survives through extreme hardship and primitive ingenuity. He drags himself to a river, drinking water and using it to clean his wounds. Starving and hypothermic, he spots a pack of wolves devouring a bison carcass. Waiting until they finish, he crawls to the remains and tears into the raw liver with his teeth, devouring it viscously for sustenance, blood dripping down his bearded face. To treat his infected leg wound, Glass pours gunpowder into the deep gash and ignites it with a spark, cauterizing the flesh in an agonizing scream that echoes through the forest. The flame sears the wound closed amid billowing smoke. Exhausted, Glass meets a lone Pawnee traveler named Haikuk, who has been wandering the frontier after his own village was massacred. Haikuk tends to Glass with compassion, building a fire, feeding him bone broth, applying herbal medicine to his wounds, and constructing a sweat lodge to aid healing and restore mobility. In their quiet time together, a bond forms. Haikuk shares Pawnee words and his philosophy that revenge is in the Creator's hands, while Glass communicates his loss through gestures. Once Glass can walk again, Haikuk provides him with a blanket, and the two part ways amicably. Glass continues alone. Later, as he approaches a distant campsite, he discovers Haikuk's body hanging from a tree by a band of French trappers, lynched in retribution, with a sign around his neck reading. Glass stares in silent grief and mounting rage at the swaying corpse in the cold wind. Pawaka is the daughter of Elk Dog, the chief of the Iroquois, also known as Ree tribe. Her kidnapping by French trappers sets off a chain of events that intertwines with the main protagonist Hugh Glass's survival. The Pawaka problem refers to her abduction, which motivates the Iroquois' relentless attacks on both American and French fur trappers. Early in the film, the Iroquois launch a brutal ambush on the American trapping party, killing many in their search for Pawaka. This is not random savagery but a desperate quest for justice and reunion, as the chief believes the trappers hold his daughter captive. The kidnapping highlights the exploitative dynamics of the fur trade era, where indigenous women were often victimized by European settlers. The problem originates from the French trappers' actions. They kidnap Pawaka from her village, subjecting her to sexual violence and exploitation. This act fuels the Iroquois' warfare against any white intruders in their territory, as they mistakenly target the American group, including Glass, under the assumption they are involved. Throughout the film, flashbacks and subtle dialogues reveal the broader context. Pawaka's absence devastates her father and tribe, turning their grief into a vengeful campaign. This subplot underscores the film's themes of colonialism, cultural clash, and the dehumanization of Native Americans. The Iroquois are portrayed not as villains but as protectors defending their people against invasive forces, adding layers to the narrative's exploration of survival and retribution. Analytically, the Pawaka storyline serves multiple purposes. It critiques the white savior trope prevalent in Western films. While Glass's journey is central, Pawaka's arc emphasizes indigenous agency. Her kidnapping isn't just a plot device but a commentary on historical atrocities against Native women. Her plight propels the Iroquois' actions, creating constant tension and justifying their aggression. This avoids stereotypical portrayals by grounding their violence in personal loss, criticisms and indigenous perspectives. Some critiques note that Pawaka is underdeveloped, reduced to a damsel in distress, whose trauma is shown graphically but with limited voice. Indigenous viewers have pointed out this as reinforcing harmful stereotypes, though her eventual empowerment offers partial redemption. Pawaka represents resilience and the cycle of vengeance, mirroring Glass's own quest for justice after losing his son. Overall, The Pawaka problem humanizes the Iroquois, shifting audience sympathy and enriching the film's anti-colonial undertones. Following the discovery of his Pawnee ally Haikuk's lynched body by French trappers, Glass infiltrates their camp at night, seeking revenge and resources. He witnesses Pawaka being raped by a French trapper. In a swift act, Glass kills the assailant with a knife to the throat, but another trapper knocks him unconscious during the ensuing chaos. Pawaka, seizing the moment, castrates her dead rapist in a visceral act of retribution, then cuts Glass free from his bindings before escaping on horseback. This liberation is mutual. Glass's intervention creates the opportunity for Pawaka's escape, while she reciprocates by saving him from certain death. The scene is raw and unflinching, emphasizing empowerment amid horror. Pawaka reclaims her agency, and Glass's actions indirectly align him with the Indigenous cause. This moment bridges their stories, setting up Pawaka's later role in sparing Glass's life. After the camp raid, Glass steals a horse from the French and flees into the night, but the surviving trappers alert the pursuing Iroquois warriors. A high-stakes chase ensues across the frozen landscape, with arrows whizzing past as Glass rides desperately. The pursuit culminates at a cliff's edge. Glass's horse plummets off, crashing into a tall pine tree below, where it impales and dies instantly. Glass survives the fall, tumbling into the snow, battered but alive. Stranded in a blizzard with no shelter, Glass guts the dead horse's carcass, removing its organs to create a hollow space. He crawls inside the steaming, bloodied interior, using the animal's body heat to endure the freezing night, a gruesome yet ingenious survival tactic that highlights his primal resilience. This scene, inspired by historical accounts, symbolizes rebirth and the blurring line between man and nature, as Glass emerges the next morning, slightly stronger but forever scarred. After emerging from the dead horse's carcass the morning following the blizzard, his body heat preserved by the animal's steaming entrails, allowing him to survive the night, Hugh Glass continues his arduous trek through the snowy wilderness. Now slightly stronger but still limping severely from his wounds, he fashions improved crutches from branches and presses on, driven by visions of his deceased Pawnee wife and an unyielding thirst for revenge against John Fitzgerald for murdering his son Hawk and abandoning him. Glass eventually reaches the outskirts of Fort Kiowa, the fur-trading outpost, where he collapses in exhaustion at the gates. The fort's inhabitants, including Captain Andrew Henry, rush to aid him, astonished to find him alive after assuming he had perished. Glass, barely able to speak due to his throat injury, is carried inside, where his wounds are tended. Once coherent, he recounts the betrayal, Fitzgerald's attempt to smother him, the stabbing of Hawk in front of his eyes, the partial burial while still alive, and Fitzgerald's flight with young Jim Bridger. Henry, outraged by the treachery, organizes a small search party, including himself, Glass, and a few men, to track down Fitzgerald and Bridger, who had stolen company funds and pelts before fleeing. The party rides out into the frozen landscape, following tracks toward the Missouri River. They camp for the night, with tensions high as Glass remains vigilant. The next day, they discover Bridger alone at an abandoned campsite, having been deserted by Fitzgerald. Bridger, remorseful and tearful, explains that Fitzgerald convinced him Glass was already dead and that Iroquois were imminent. He admits to leaving but insists he didn't know about Hawk's murder, pointing to the canteen he left as proof of his conflicted conscience. Henry, somewhat sympathetic to the young man's naivety, places him under guard but spares him immediate punishment, focusing on pursuing Fitzgerald. As the group advances, they split briefly for scouting. Fitzgerald, hidden in the trees ahead, ambushes them by firing a rifle shot that kills Henry instantly, blowing off part of his head. Glass, hearing the shot, rushes to find Henry's lifeless body in the snow. In a calculated move to lure Fitzgerald out, Glass props Henry's corpse upright on his horse using branches, draping it in a cloak to mimic a living rider. He then sends the horse trotting toward Fitzgerald's position across a frozen river. Fitzgerald, mistaking it for a pursuer, shoots the rider from afar, then cautiously approaches on foot to confirm the kill. Upon realizing it's the dead Henry, he is momentarily stunned, giving Glass the opening to emerge from hiding in the riverbank and shoot at him, wounding Fitzgerald in the shoulder. This ignites the climactic final fight between Glass and Fitzgerald, a savage, prolonged brawl in the snow and shallow river. Fitzgerald mocks Glass's survival and justifies killing Hawk as self-defense. They grapple ferociously. Fitzgerald stabs Glass in the abdomen with a knife. Glass bites off part of Fitzgerald's fingers and slashes his face. They roll into the icy water, punching, choking, and drowning each other amid bloodied splashes. Glass gains the upper hand, pinning Fitzgerald and preparing to slit his throat with his knife. However, he pauses, haunted by the words of his late Pawnee ally Haikuk, "Revenge is in the Creator's hands." Instead of delivering the fatal blow, Glass shoves the gravely wounded Fitzgerald into the river's current, where he floats downstream, helpless and bleeding. At that moment, a group of Iroquois warriors, led by Chief Elk Dog, emerges from the tree line on the opposite bank, having been tracking the trappers. The current carries Fitzgerald directly to them. The warriors drag him ashore, where Elk Dog personally scalps and kills him in retribution for the broader atrocities against their people, including the kidnapping of his daughter Pawaka. Glass, watching from afar, collapses against a tree, his own wounds reopening. As the Iroquois prepare to leave, Pawaka, now riding among them on horseback after her escape and reunion with her tribe, spots Glass slumped in the snow. She rides closer, locking eyes with him in a moment of silent recognition. He is the man who inadvertently enabled her liberation from the French trappers by killing her assailant and creating chaos in their camp. Rather than alerting her father or the warriors to finish him off, Pawaka chooses mercy, sparing his life as an unspoken acknowledgement of his role in her freedom. She turns her horse and rides away with the group, glancing back once more as they disappear into the forest. Weakened and alone, Glass hallucinates his Pawnee wife one final time. She appears ethereal in the distance, walking away through the trees, symbolizing peace or the afterlife beckoning. As he struggles to breathe, his gaze shifts directly toward the camera, his eyes locking onto the audience in a prolonged, unflinching stare. His labored breaths fog the lens, creating a misty veil, before the screen fades to black, ending the film. Pawaka's appearance in the very final sequence, riding on horseback among the Iroquois warriors, observing Glass from afar, and ultimately sparing him, serves as a pivotal narrative closure and thematic anchor. Presented as a stoic, resilient figure reclaimed by her tribe, she embodies Indigenous agency and survival in a story dominated by colonial violence. Her presence is brief but loaded, clad in traditional attire, on horseback. She represents the Iroquois' mobility and enduring strength, contrasting Glass's immobilized, broken state. The camera lingers on her face during the eye contact with Glass, emphasizing mutual recognition without dialogue. Her subtle nod or gaze conveys gratitude and mercy, tying back to her earlier liberation. This moment subverts the damsel in distress trope that defined her earlier subplot, her kidnapping and assault by French trappers. Instead of remaining a passive victim, Pawaka's decision to spare Glass highlights her empowerment. She wields the power of life and death, choosing clemency based on personal justice rather than tribal vengeance. This act humanizes the Iroquois, portraying them not as monolithic antagonists but as a community driven by familial bonds, her reunion with Elk Dog, and capable of nuance. Thematically, it reinforces the film's exploration of revenge cycles. Glass relinquishes his kill to the Creator, and Pawaka extends grace, breaking the chain of violence. However, critics have noted her underdeveloped character arc. Her presence feels somewhat symbolic, representing broader Indigenous resilience against settler exploitation, but it risks reducing her to a plot device for Glass's redemption. Nonetheless, in the context of the film's anti-colonial undertones, her sparing gaze elevates her as a moral compass, suggesting that survival and justice transcend individual vendettas. Glass looking at the camera and breaking the fourth wall. The film's concluding shots, Glass's direct stare into the camera, his breaths fogging the lens, and the fade to black, constitute a bold stylistic choice, deliberately breaking the fourth wall to implicate the audience. After the hallucination of his wife fades, Glass turns his bloodied, weary face toward the viewer, his eyes piercing and accusatory, holding the gaze for an extended beat. This meta-technique shatters the illusion of cinematic distance, transforming the passive spectator into an active participant or witness to the brutality depicted. This moment amplifies themes of endurance and human frailty. Glass's fogged breaths mimic the bear's earlier attack, where its breath fogged the lens, bookending the film with visceral realism and reminding us of nature's indifference. Breaking the fourth wall invites introspection. Viewers are forced to confront their complicity in historical narratives of conquest, survival, and violence, as if Glass is judging modern audiences for the legacies of colonialism. It also blurs reality and fiction, drawing from influences like Terrence Malick's poetic introspection. Some interpret it as Glass's soul departing or a nod to the real Hugh Glass legend's mythic status, but critically, it heightens emotional impact, leaving the film on an ambiguous, haunting note rather than tidy resolution. This technique, rare in mainstream cinema, underscores the Revenant's arthouse ambitions amid its epic scope, provoking discomfort and reflection long after the credits. The Pawaka problem, through the lens of Claude Levi-Strauss's theory on the exchange of women. Levi-Strauss, 1908–2009, a foundational figure in structural anthropology, developed his theory of kinship and the exchange of women primarily in his seminal 1949 book, The Elementary Structures of Kinship, originally published in French as Les Structures élémentaires de la parenté. This work represents a cornerstone of his broader structuralist approach, which views human societies as systems governed by underlying binary oppositions and rules, much like linguistic structures. Levi-Strauss drew from ethnographic data across indigenous societies, in Australia, Asia, and the Americas, to argue that kinship is not merely about biological descent but about alliances formed through reciprocal exchanges. At the heart of this theory is the concept of alliance theory, which posits that societies are built on networks of relationships created through the exchange of goods, services, and, crucially, women between kin groups. Levi-Strauss distinguishes between elementary structures, where marriage rules prescribe specific partners, often involving direct or generalized exchange of women, and complex structures, found in modern societies, where choice is freer but still indirectly influenced by social norms. He influenced later anthropologists like Louis Dumont and has been both praised for illuminating social cohesion and critiqued for its implications. Levi-Strauss's theory begins with two linked principles, the universal incest taboo and the principle of reciprocity, inspired by Marcel Mauss's work on gift-giving. The incest taboo prohibits marriage or sexual relations within close kin, compelling exogamy, marrying outside one's group. This creates a necessity for alliances between groups, achieved through the exchange of women, who are treated as the supreme gift in a system of reciprocity. In elementary kinship structures, this exchange can be restricted, direct swaps between two groups, or generalized, circulating women among multiple groups in a cycle, ensuring broader alliances. Women, in this framework, function as signs in a communicative system. Their movement between groups symbolizes and solidifies social bonds, preventing isolation and fostering cooperation. Levi-Strauss likened this to language, where women are words exchanged in a dialogue between men or patrilineal groups. This is not literal commodification but a structural mechanism where the exchange regulates power, resources, and peace. For instance, in some indigenous societies, a woman's marriage to another clan's man might seal a trade agreement or end a feud. This is revealing how societies maintain equilibrium through structured exchanges. Strengths include its cross-cultural applicability and emphasis on universal human cognition. Binary oppositions like endogamy/exogamy underpin social order. It also highlights how culture overrides nature. The incest taboo, though possibly biological in origin, becomes a cultural rule driving social evolution. However, the theory has faced significant critiques. Feminist anthropologists, such as Gail Rubin in her 1975 essay, The Traffic in Women, argue that it objectifies women as passive objects in male-dominated transactions, reinforcing patriarchal structures and ignoring women's agency. Post-colonial scholars note its Eurocentric bias, as Levi Strauss generalized from primitive societies to all humanity, potentially romanticizing or oversimplifying non-Western cultures. Empirically, not all societies fit neatly into elementary, complex binaries, and the theory undervalues matrilineal systems where women hold more power. Despite these flaws, it remains influential in understanding how exchanges create social fabric, influencing fields like sociology and gender studies. Pawaka's storyline in The Revenant, her abduction and rape by French trappers, followed by her liberation, can be interpreted as a distorted, colonial perversion of Levi Strauss's exchange of women, transforming a potentially alliance-building mechanism into one of exploitation and violence. In traditional indigenous contexts akin to those Levi Strauss studied, among Native American tribes, the exchange of women through marriage could serve as a reciprocal gift to forge intertribal bonds, regulated by kinship rules and mutual respect. However, in the film's 1820s frontier setting, colonial intruders like the French trappers subvert this. Pawaka is not exchanged consensually but stolen as a commodity, treated as property for sexual gratification and labor, echoing historical accounts of indigenous women being trafficked in the fur trade era. This links directly to Levi Strauss's ideas because the abduction disrupts the reciprocal alliance system. Instead of building social ties, it ignites conflict, as seen in the Iroquois' vengeful raids to reclaim her, mirroring how violations of exchange norms could lead to feuds and elementary kinship structures. The rape scene underscores the objectification critique of Levi Strauss. Pawaka is reduced to a sign of colonial dominance, her body exchanged not for alliance but for power assertion, highlighting how imperialism warps anthropological structures into tools of oppression. Her liberation, facilitated indirectly by Hugh Glass's intervention, killing her assailant and creating chaos, represents a break from this cycle. Pawaka's act of castrating her rapist and freeing Glass reclaims agency, subverting the passive role Levi Strauss assigned to women in exchanges. Later, her mercy toward Glass in the finale, sparing him as he did her, suggests a restored, albeit improvised, reciprocity, aligning with Levi Strauss's reciprocity principle but empowering the exchanged woman as an active participant. Analytically, this arc critiques colonial distortions of indigenous kinship systems, using Pawaka to illustrate how women, far from mere gifts, can disrupt and redefine exchange dynamics in the face of trauma. It adds depth to the film's anti-colonial themes, portraying the Pawaka problem, not just as personal tragedy but as a structural clash between traditional alliances and exploitative exchanges imposed by settlers.